Elections, the state's nonpartisan voter education agency. My name is Nohelani Graff, and I'll be moderating today's debate. Our format is going to be a little different today. We're hosting a 30-minute one-on-one discussion since only one candidate has agreed to participate. The incumbent, Representative Eli Crane, has declined our invitation. Thanks to a partnership with the Clean Elections Commission and the Arizona Media Association, we are working to make sure all 2024 debates are the most accessible in Arizona history. That means this conversation will air on a long list of local TV stations, radio stations, and digital platforms, including support from local newspapers. Transparency is critical here. That's why this conversation has been designed with input from a broad group of journalists in Arizona representing urban and rural communities. We also want to thank voters across Arizona who have submitted questions as well. We've reviewed all of them to make sure every voice is heard. However, no candidate has been given advanced access to any of those questions. So with that, let's introduce the Democratic congressional candidate, Mr. Jonathan Nez. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Nohelani, for having me. Appreciate it.
So, Mr. Nez, we are going to start by giving you 2 minutes for an opening statement. You have the floor.
Well, my name is Jonathan Nez, and to honor my elders, the Navajo elders, I'm going to introduce myself in the Navajo language. And what I said there is my clans, and also, just honoring our elders and our code talkers as well, and all our veterans and our warriors that have served this great country of ours. Well, I grew up on the Navajo Nation without running water or electricity, and grew up with Republican parents. That teaching of bootstrap mentality. In Navajo, they call it being self-sufficient and self-reliant. Growing up there on the Navajo Nation was an awesome life. My parents instilled into me, that you can do whatever you want. And I did have my grandfather was a council member, and I always wanted to be like him, and being in public service. So, of course, our grandparents and our elders always challenged us to go get an education, get the experience, get that, and then come home and help your people. And so 18 years of public service. Fast forward today, I was a lawmaker of the Navajo Nation Council, as well as a Navajo County Board of Supervisor, and became the vice president and president of the Navajo Nation. And when I graduated from Northern Arizona University, my wife and I returned home to be of service. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share, some of our thoughts and what we've heard all across the district.
Now, Mr. Nez, tonight might look like a one-man show to those watching,
Right.
But your opponent, Eli Crane, is still very much a part of this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
He is the incumbent who did win his party's primary
Right.
handily. So do you think that him not being here tonight is a signal to voters, sending a message of bold confidence that you pose little competition, or is it a misread that gives you the advantage?
Well, I can't tell you what he's thinking right now, but he has missed 2 debates thus far. And I'm sure the constituents in District 2 want to hear what he has done thus far, being in office for a little bit over a year and a half. And, I think there's really not much to report, as you have seen. There's a lot of dysfunction in Washington, D.C. Last October in 2023, around that time, we saw, a speaker being ousted, coming to a brink of a government shutdown, and just an extreme group of representatives that are making it very difficult for this Congress to function. And I think many of you know and remember the days when Republicans and independents, Democrats worked together. And, you know, it's not happening now. What we need is someone that knows the district. You know, I was born in the district. I was raised in the district. I went to school and served, and still being of service in the community, unlike my opponent who lives in Oro Valley, close to Tucson. What we need is someone in Congress that knows the issues of the district. And, you know, I am vying to be the first Native American to be elected from the state of Arizona to Washington, D.C. in the halls of U.S. House of Representatives.
So this is a chance for voters to get to know you a little bit better. So for those who are not familiar with how tribal government works, how did your work as president of the Navajo Nation prepare you for the U.S. Congress?
Well, let me go back a little bit. I was a lawmaker and also was a Navajo County Board of Supervisor. During my 2 terms as a county board of supervisor, we were able to work together and bring the needed resources, our fair share of resources, into the county to help everyone. It's not about who voted for me and helping them. It's about everyone, even those that did not vote for me. And I have a record of bringing people together. And as you mentioned, my time in tribal government, you know, we have a direct relationship with the federal government, a nation-to-nation relationship. So I was able to go before Congress, testify in hearings for the needs of our citizens up in the Navajo Nation. And that will only continue because I have the experience. You know, 18 years of public service does bring a large network. And of course, my opponent has been in service in the military, and we thank him for his service, and we thank all our military men and women who have served, as well as the families. Let's not forget the families. And a couple of weeks ago, we had National Navajo Code Talkers Day, which honors our code talkers for utilizing the language that I just spoke at the onset, which helped win battles and helped win World War II. So we have a history of service in the military as Native Americans. I think they also say per capita of any ethnic group in this country, Native Americans have served, and of that, a majority of them are the Navajo people. And thank you for your service.
So, Mr. Nez, let's dive deeper into some of those issues that would be on the table if you were in Congress, and very localized at that. Let's talk about wildfires. There were 2, and this is such a pressing issue, certainly for the northern portion of the state that you would be covering. Right. There were 2 wildfires in 2022 within 2 months. Wildfires continue to plague portions of the country, but especially the high country of Arizona. The season is getting tougher and tougher to tell when it is. So what do you think needs to be done to mitigate that threat or improve responses? Is it deforestation? Is it prescribed burns? Because you would be advocating for federal funding.
Right. Thank you for that question. You know, up in the northern parts of the state, especially in communities like Flagstaff and then Payson, on the tribal communities as well, there's a need for additional resources. You know, let me first say that, you know, there are folks out there that do not believe in climate change, you know, and we see it evident even in the metropolitan, in this metropolitan area of Phoenix. I believe this year has broken records of having heat-related deaths, as well as, you know, high temperatures. And so we need to get resources needed to combat these climate changing events in our communities. And let's go back to your question about the forest. Yes, we do need to thin out the forest. We need to have healthy forests. And after, let's say, a fire goes through a region, we also need to have funding for mitigation of flooding. As a Navajo County Board of Supervisor, the Four Fry project, we were able to bring the counties together and to make sure that, we bring in the resources to make sure that there are healthy forests in the region. And the thinning of the forests, we should be able to support local communities to utilize the timber so that we could be able to utilize that to build more homes, to build more businesses in the area. And it's all about job creation. And I know that many of our folks out there want to live in the rural areas or in the tribal communities. And we're going to continue to advocate to make sure that they're able to live there. And I can go on about the need for child care, affordable child care in those areas as well, so that we can keep our folks who want to stay in the rural parts of Arizona, because a strong rural Arizona is a strong Arizona as a whole.
We'll get more to that and the cost of living in just a minute, but just sticking with the wildfires for a moment, if you are talking about forest thinning, the argument, of course, against it is that you destroy natural habitats. Is there a balance?
Well, there is a balance, and you could see that happening in the forests around Flagstaff, and we need to protect folks that have homes in the area as well. Mm-hmm. And we can't just continue to have enormous growth in those forests. We also need to clean them up and make sure that there is less debris in those forests, because once the fire hits the debris, and that's what takes the fire into into populated areas, and we don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm. When we do talk about the cost of living, making sure that the middle class can survive across the state, but in northern Arizona, in Coconino County especially, housing costs have gone way up. They've also had the 17% minimum wage increase. Mm-hmm. Do you see a change like that as something that helps the people there, or does it hurt small businesses? What needs to be done so that the middle class can survive?
Right. Our people are struggling all across the state. And because they see the high prices of food, the high prices of gas, the high prices of rent and mortgages. And what's the relief? We need to bring in jobs, and also, as I mentioned earlier, the support needed so that people can live in rural Arizona and in tribal communities. For instance, on the Navajo Nation, we built 3 new hospitals on the Navajo Nation. Of course, you build a hospital, you need to recruit and retain staff, professionals in the community. And what we did was we provided housing for those healthcare professionals. At a lower rent for many of those healthcare professionals, so they can stay in the community. But of course, that's just one, because a lot of the healthcare professionals are young, and they are young parents. And we need to also bring the affordable child care into these communities. Child care facilities in rural and tribal communities is needed. And once we were able to bring in some of those resources to build those types of facilities, they're more likely to enjoy being there, and we can keep them in their communities. Of course, as president, we focused on growing our own professionals, getting them to school. When we do scholarships, we're able to bring them back home and say, you got to do your residency in our local communities. And let's not forget the trades too. And there's a lot of unions out there that want to, be closer to home rather than traveling miles and miles, maybe even hundreds of miles to work. And that's why funding is needed to bring back into our state so that, our people can stay in the state. It'll be a stronger state if our our rural relatives or rural people come back and help out in their communities.
Well, you mentioned expanding hospitals for healthcare, and certainly in a lot of the rural areas, telemedicine has expanded to try and give them access, but we also still have many communities on the nation, as you know, that don't have access to the internet. You said you grew up with no electricity. Some now are even still getting electricity for the first time. So what do you think needs to happen to change that when it comes to access for rural communities to technology, to healthcare? What else can be changed on a federal level?
Well, there is a move to bring in a lot more infrastructure into rural America. And I just want to say thank you to the previous administration, the Trump administration, and now the Biden administration for, historic amounts of dollars for infrastructure all across the country. On the Navajo Nation, we have seen historic amounts of funding coming in to expand electricity. You can't just have broadband going in one direction without electricity. And to better the quality of life, you also need water in these communities. We have a lot of growth areas throughout the state of Arizona, and the need for water has been one of the biggest questions that I have received from Globe and Florence and all the way into the city of Maricopa, the need for water and the need for better infrastructure. We need to bring in those dollars, and I know that there is plans to have another infrastructure bill. I know the argument from conservatives that will say, well, we don't want to put any more dollars on the national debt. But ladies and gentlemen, we all pay taxes, income taxes, local taxes, federal income taxes. And don't you want some of those dollars to come back into your communities to help improve the quality of life? And that is the record that I have for the Navajo Nation. And now at a larger scale, when you elect me as your congressman, I will fight hard. And again, it's not for just the people who voted for me, like my opponent. It's for everyone, because we deserve a representative that will get the needed resources back into our communities. And I will do just that, and I have a record to prove it.
Well, Mr. Nez, I'm glad that you mentioned some of the other cities that are encompassed by your district, because it is the largest surface area district in the state. So parts of your district would be closer to the border, Maricopa, Casa Grande. The issue of immigration, of course, has wide-ranging impacts. But the general criticism of Democratic candidates is that they support open borders. So where do you stand?
That's a good question. Well, as a Native American of this country, of these lands, folks came to America to have a better life. And to this day, people are wanting to have a piece of that American dream. That's what this nation has been built on, is diversity, and also making sure that they have a better future for their children and their grandchildren. Now, I understand that there are some bad actors wanting to come in. That's where we need to bring funding and the needed resources to the border, to our Border Patrol, all the folks that are protecting us on the border, so that they can do their job and they can do their job effectively. And we also need to make sure that the process for people coming into this country is a little quicker. There's a backlog, and we need more judges. We need more court staff, so that people that are wanting to come in this country and have a better life have that opportunity. Of course, if we put the resources into the border, they will catch the bad actors. I know that there are drugs coming across the border, and we also need to address the mental health, the behavioral health of those that are struggling. I struggled myself with substance abuse, and I thank those counselors who, gave me an opportunity to see that I could be of help to the citizens and to be of help everywhere I go. And I'm sure some of our folks, and many of our folks, are wanting to get that support so that they can overcome their addiction. But at the same time, we need to make sure that the border is secure so that no bad actors come in, and also drugs don't come into our country.
Well, recently there was a House bill on the table. It was the Continuing Appropriations and Border Security Enhancement Act. It was a bipartisan bill.
Absolutely.
It did fail. Your opponent, Mr. Crane, did vote against it and against party lines. Among many things, it would have resumed construction of former President Trump's wall. It would have imposed some new rules for asylum seekers. It also would have prevented some COVID mandates. Where would your vote have gone on that one?
It would go in favor of the legislation. You see, we finally saw some bipartisanship efforts. The Republicans, the Democrats, of course, the independents coming together to draft a legislation that would get the needed resources to the border. Staff, and also, as I mentioned earlier, getting dollars to the courts so that people can come in without all that backlog and get into this country so that they can be productive citizens here. And, you know, I know that there's going to be another attempt to introduce or reintroduce this bill in its current form. You know, that's a start. No legislation is perfect, right? It's something there to build upon, but that's a start. It was a big start until, you know, the former president said we shouldn't go that direction because it's going to hurt his re-election efforts. It's supposed to be about the people, not party or for getting re-elected.
And I do want to, because we're starting to run down our time here, but I want to make sure that we get to some natural resources. Also, you talked about water. I also want to ask you about another natural resource, though, uranium. Some want to push for mining. President Biden named an area primed for that as part of a national monument that honors Native Americans specifically. So do you believe that growing uranium mining would help the state's economy, stabilizing energy, or is it hurting the health of people?
You know, I come from a community that has seen people ending up in the hospital because of the over 500 open uranium mines, the testing that occurs in the surrounding places. I know we are fighting hard to get RECA, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, reauthorized so that those folks who worked in the mine get their just compensation, as well as, you know, putting dollars away so that we can clean up some of those uranium mines on the Navajo Nation. You know, it's the federal government's responsibility. And as you know, the federal government opens up these federal lands for natural resource extraction, including uranium. And that is the reason why the Grand Canyon region was protected. And it was not just protected for the tribes, it was protected for all of us as Americans for the future. And I don't want to see lives lost because of cancers from the extraction of uranium in communities. But, you know, I recognize that technology gets better every year, every 5 years. You know, if technology is in the future where, you know, these natural resources can be used and it doesn't harm the land or harm the people, then, you know, I'll listen to that proposal. But
if there were a way to prove that uranium could be safe.
Right, absolutely.
Then you wouldn't rule it out. Absolutely.
And you know, for us on the Navajo Nation, the coal that was being extracted actually has contributed to black lungs for those miners in the area as well. And, you know, any type of natural resource extraction needs to be done carefully and make sure that the health and well-being of an individual in the area is focused upon.
Very quickly, before I get to your closing statement, I do want to ask, because it has become pretty standard now with debates here, when we talk about the 2020 election and election integrity, do you believe that the 2020 election was stolen?
No.
Would you certify the results for this next election? Will you agree however they...
Absolutely. Our elections are done correctly. Of course, it's not perfect, but it is done correctly. And we shouldn't disenfranchise anybody's vote. Just recently, the Supreme Court ruled that you have, in the state of Arizona, that you have to have ID to be at the polls. You know what? Some of our elders were not born at the hospital. They were born at home. They don't have birth certificates, and they're Native Americans. They're the first citizens of this country, but yet, because of the Supreme Court ruling, their vote is in jeopardy.
Thank
you. Yeah.
So I do want to get to your closing remarks before we go, because our half hour has gone quickly, and so this is your final chance to speak to the voters. You have 1 minute.
Well, let me just say thank you again. I have traveled this large district. It's one of the largest in the country. It's over 60% of the state, over 58,000 square miles. Matter of fact, we just put 400 miles just today, going all the way to the Wallapai Nation in Peach Springs and to come here. And it's a very diverse district. Out of the 22 tribes in Arizona, 14 of them are in this district. And so I am respectfully asking for your vote in Congressional District 2. I have a proven record of progress. I have a proven record of bringing resources into the area, especially in the constituencies that I've had over these 18 years of public service. And so that fight will continue, and I think we all need to warrior up these next couple of months and make sure that we put in people that have the best heart for the citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Nez. We appreciate your time. That is all the time that we do have for this debate for Congressional District 2. On behalf of our partners at Clean Elections, the Arizona Media Association, Reister, and Bitfire Studios, we want to thank you for joining us.